Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Biohacking Training Lesson, webinar lesson number 3, electrolyte balance and zeta potential. Now, I did discuss doing a case study, and one of the things I'm going to do, I've done a case study, and I'm going to paste that as a separate presentation. Okay, separate to this one. So I'm pasting lesson 3, and a lesson 3A. Okay, today. So I just thought I'd keep it separate, just to make it a little bit more simpler. We've all been. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about the electrolyte balance, electrolyte excess, electrolyte deficiency, and we're going to be talking about zeta potential, which is very linked in with these electrolyte balances. Okay, so when we do these assessments, the first thing we look at is electrical balance. Making sure that we've got the right level of electrolytes and minerals in the body, because if we don't have that, nothing's going to work. So it's right at the top of the hierarchy, if you like, of the systems that we look at. So it's a really important one, because if it's not fixed, nothing's going to happen. Okay, and we're going to have a look at powerhouse topic here. We're going to be talking about calcium to phosphoric acid ratios here. I see this quite a lot. It's quite a big issue, and it's something that can be addressed very quickly and can have some quite extreme positive results very quickly. So we're going to be touching on that. Discussion and Q&A, of course, with this. We're not going to be doing this. Is going to be a recorded only webinar. So, we'll be doing the discussion, I guess, at a later. Okay, electrolyte balance. I just want you to read this through. Body fluids are an aqueous electronegative colloidal suspension. Okay, this is to say that the normal body fluids, the particles in suspension, remain discrete, separate, because they're negatively charged. Okay, you've heard me talk about this a lot. In other words, they do not clump together. Okay, this discreteness of particles is essential to serve the function of suspension, which is quite simply to serve the body's transport medium. Okay, if we don't have this transport medium, we have nothing. We have no ability to transport nutrients into our cells. We have no ability to get rid of our waste products and whatnot out of the system. Okay, so it's. And if we look at the hierarchy, if we look at the 5 fundamental balances that we're looking at here, that we're working on, you can see at the top here, it's the most important. Okay, this is why it's right at the top. Okay, it rules over everything below. Okay, which is why we need to look at it first. Okay, where does this work come from? Now, we've talked about this before, but I thought I'd just highlight. This is Dr. T.C. McDaniel. Cardiovascular expert who did a lot of work, followed a lot of work from Thomas Riddick, a colloidal chemist, and in regards to electrolytes, zeta potential and whatnot. Okay, so this is where this work comes from. This guy had a practice. He was still practicing at 100 years old in his practice with his cardiovascular practice. And I think I've mentioned it before. T.C. McDaniel basically ran his practice on nothing more than using a conductivity meter. Okay, and using distilled water and certain minerals and electrolytes to be able to bring things back into balance. Okay, some of you may have seen this disease reprieve. I highly recommend you read it. This is where this work comes from. Like I said, if we dig deeper, we dig deeper down into the Thomas Riddick, the colloidal chemist and whatnot. But a lot of this stuff directly comes from T.C. McDaniel. So have a look. You can get that on eBay. It's on Amazon. It's a few dollars. Just grab it and have a read. It's really a good book. Okay, and there's some very powerful messages in this book. Okay, which is reflected through the work that I do. Okay, why is it so important? Well, as we said just now, either too many or too few electrolytes, or electrolytes with the wrong electromagnetic charges, can result in a collapse of the colloidal suspension with severe disease consequences. Okay, this is all about coagulation. This is all about stopping the flow of life. Okay, if we don't have this perfect electromagnetic charges in our system, things just don't work, and we've talked about that a fair bit. Now we're going to be touching on colloidal suspension and zeta potential, because when electrolytes go haywire, the zeta potential goes out, and I'm going to talk about what do I mean by zeta potential and what do I mean by colloidal suspension. Okay, so in essence, the blood is a suspension of colloids, particles, okay? And in colloid chemistry, blood could easily be thought as nothing more than a colloidal slurry. And the principles that apply to any colloidal slurry or suspension also apply to the blood. Okay, it's a flow system, it's no different. The term most apt to explain the coming together of the red blood cells and the various microbial forms in the blood is zeta potential. This relates to the electrical charge around a colloid in the blood that is controlled by pH and all the other elements found in the soup. Okay, so it's all about, I've talked about zeta potential a lot. I've talked about the issue with dehydration a lot. This is all tied into just keeping everything into solution and everything into suspension so that we can actually move things around. When we talk about colloids, we talked about this in our last lesson. All of life moves around about the constant interplay between the forces of anions, okay? Cations and anions, electrically charged ions, okay? So the anions are the negatively charged ions. We want more of those, okay? And they're created through the electron gain. And cations are positively charged ions created through the electron loss. We talked about this last week. And in colloidal chemistry, the term used to discuss this charge around a colloidal particle, again, is zeta potential. Is the body electric? Well, of course we are. We're nothing but a bag of elements. And if we look at this table of elements here, look, this is what we're made of, okay? We're a bag of fat, protein, sugar, anions, and cations, and that's it, okay? This is the stuff that makes up the terrain of the cells of the body and all the stuff around which every cell exists and either experience life or various stages of life to ultimate death, okay? We are electrical chemical beings. And it's all about zeta potential, okay? If we don't have zeta potential, we have nothing. If zeta potential is low, toxins cannot be suspended for elimination, nutrients cannot be suspended for absorption or transportation into the cell. We've talked about this before. This is not just zeta potential. If dehydration, if our fluid's down too, we're going to have the same sorts of issues. Okay, as soon as we start going too high or too low, we're going to start running into these issues with zeta potential going out of whack, the electromagnetic charge is changing, and things not flowing as they should. Pretty important, don't you think? Just a brief definition of terms. The zeta potential, I'm going to keep pumping this into you, okay, indicates the degree of repulsion between adjacent similarly charged particles in a dispersion, okay. Anionic is negatively charged, okay. They repel, they disperse. Cationic is positively charged, and cationic substances in the blood causes blood to aggregate, to clump, to agglutinate, okay. Anionic is good. Cationic is bad. We need both, of course. Otherwise, we have no energy. But it's the anionic that we're looking for. In a general way of thinking, which is overly simplistic, think of anions as dispersers and cations as coagulators. Anions disperse things, cations bring things together. Further, you could say anions lean alkaline and cationic tends to lean acid. Okay, and I'm going to keep talking about this because this is so important. This flow. You know, we're trying to work with people. We're trying to implement protocols, and we don't have a flow. We don't have the means to move this stuff around the body. We don't have the means to move nutrients into the cells. We don't have the means to move toxins out of the cells. So, is it really is it really worth doing anything unless you get this fundamental system in place? Well, of course not. Now, you can have a look in the book and the disease reprieve, and you can get in a little bit more detail in this. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is just a very brief overview of what we mean by zeta potential, and you can read about this in the book. But basically, a particle in a solution tends to, what it'll do, it tends to form this negative layer, outer layer, or called diffuse layer. You can see this here. And what that does, it creates a slight negative charge. And that, when we have another negative charge come up against it, it repels. Okay? As long as we've got enough anions to be able to fill those gaps and build that diffuse layer, we attract these more anions, and then as we attract more anions on the outer edge of this diffuse layer, that's what creates this repulsion. Okay, if we don't have enough anions, we're going to get clumping because we don't have the charge, we don't have the right charges. Okay, but you can read about that in a little bit more detail in the book. Here's an indication. Look, I wanted to post this for a while because I've done loads of correlations with this. Just to, like, do we need to have a conductivity meter to know all this? Well, it's good to get precise and whatnot, but to be honest, have a look at your P, because your P can give you obviously a very good indicator as to whether your zeta potential is out or not. If we look here in a hydrated area here, this is where we're looking at good zeta potential, around 12 millisiemens. We can almost guarantee that if other things are in play, okay, that if we have P on that lighter side, that we're going to create dispersion. We're going to have pretty good zeta potential, and things are going to start, we're going to have dispersion. But as we move down into this dehydrated and extremely dehydrated, this is when zeta potential goes right out. Okay, and this is when we get coagulation, blood sticking together, and agglutination and whatnot. Okay, and if we come down to extremely dehydrated, obviously once we get down to that really dark, well, there's something seriously going on. Okay, so that's just a bit of an indicator, something you can do. Just check your P, and if it's a bit dark, drink some water. Okay, maintain it at these lighter areas, probably the top two more than anything, as opposed to the third one. Okay, and that alone can make such a big difference. All right, because it's easy. You can do a P and you can check it. Ideal ranges when you're measuring, we talked about this last week, but the ideal ranges when we're measuring for zeta potential is between 5 and 15 millisiemens, and with an ideal marker of 12. Now 12 is basically when it sort of 12 is when the kidneys are working probably about half the workload that they need to, and that's how our body's designed. Okay, and saliva 4.5 to 5.5 millisiemens. Okay, so that just gives you a bit of indication. But like I said, once you start doing these recordings and start recording some of these numbers, you'll start to see some correlations with. You start to record, conductivity, and then you have a P, and you'll start to see where your body sits, and you get to a point where you don't even have to do a conductivity meter, because by your P. Okay, you can tell, but you can only tell once you start doing some measuring, because you need a reference point. Okay, so just it's just about playing around, and it's not about getting it exact right the first time and everything being precise. It's about playing around. It's about experimenting and seeing how your body reacts and how your body works. Okay, and here's an interesting one. This is really interesting. Lemons are the only food on the planet that is anionic in nature. Okay, this is why lemons are so good for your liver. The high levels of anions cancelling out the toxicity of the toxic cations. So lemons are highly anionic. They have very high level of anionic particles in lemons. And as soon as those anionic particles meet the cationic toxins in the liver, it starts neutralizing. Okay, this is why lemons are so good for the liver. It's the anions in the liver, all right? Very few people talk about this or understand this, but it's so important. All right? This is why lemons are so good. It's so good at neutralizing and clearing out toxins, okay? It's just a chemical reaction. And there is no other food. You can get the minerals, of course. But potassium citrate is an ionic surfactant, but it's not come directly from eating a food. Just some of the concepts of zeta potential, just to give you a bit of an overview. We're talking about soap, paint, water treatment. If we look at soap, in various industries, the concept of zeta potential is common knowledge. Zeta potential plays a critical role in many industrial processes. The manufacturing of soap is one example. Water by itself does not always clean as well as it could. Sometimes the water needs to be made wetter. How on earth can you make the water wet? How can you make water wetter? Then it becomes cleaner and disperses dirt on gungy dishes by adding an anionic surfactant to the water and thereby changing its charge. Okay, the anionic soapy water does the better job of getting between the cationic dirt particles of the dirty dishes and disperses the garbage. Okay, give you an example. You imagine you have a roast dinner and you've got all the fat and whatnot and on the plate and all the oil, and you put it into the soapy water, and the soap water is anionic. It has anionic surfactants in it. It has to, because it's a cleaning thing. So what happens is, where does that oil go? You put it into the sink, and it all disperses. It's completely disperses. You can't find it. It's all there, but it's completely dispersed. Okay. And so this is what happens. Dishwashing liquid is anionic. It needs to get in there and break apart these cationic bonds. If we look at paints, if we look at pigments, okay, whether a quantity of pigment added to a base paint would coagulate or form a speckled mess or disperse into trillions of tiny particles, each remaining separate and discrete, thereby leaving an even color, depends almost entirely on the electrical properties of the system. Once again, these particles, these paint pigments, are negatively charged so that they repel, they disperse, they stay discrete. In water, purifying water, the treatments plants, so zeta potential plays a crucial role in order to get out the pollutants. This is a little bit of a different process. The treatments facility pours in highly cationic substance like aluminium sulfate, which attracts the garbage to itself and thereby coagulating, floccuating out the precipitate. So this is completely opposite. Okay, we're using positively charged particles here to be able to attract other positive and precipitate and flock everything out of solution. Okay, so it's around. It's nothing new, and it's been known. Our blood, the zeta potential and the impact on our blood has been known for a long time too. So we don't talk about it. And we talk about, I talk about the flow of life. We talk about the suspended particles, the pH, and the mix of anions and cations all determine the body's rheological characteristics. When I say rheological, we're talking about flow. Okay, rheo is from Greek and it means flow. Okay, so it's in the blood. It's the amount of suspended particles, the pH, the suspension, the mix of anions and cations that all determine these characteristics. Okay, and if you have a look on the left-hand side, you can see a couple of examples. Flow equals life, good dispersion, anionic. You can see the red blood cells, nice and dispersed, nice and separate, discrete. Okay, this is what this is all about. Whereas down below here, you can see no flow, congestion. This is where things are starting to attract, starting to connect together. There's too many cations. There has to be. Okay, so if we look at this picture on the left-hand side, the bottom left-hand side, if we were to just take some potassium citrate or something like that, you'd almost certain within 3 minutes, 2 minutes, those cells will start to disperse because of the high level of anions we're introducing to our blood. Okay, and this can be done in clinic, it can be done at home, it can be done in seconds, this sort of thing. I've helped relieve people of cardiovascular stress in less than a minute by doing this. It's not a fix. As such, of course, we know this is not a fix. This is not about, oh, well, we just add this and it's a fix. Because, well, why are they sticking to, why do we have too many cations in the first place anyway? And we need to address that. But hey, let's jump in, intervene, get things flowing. And that makes a little bit more sense, that then we can actually get on and do the job that needs to be done because we have some flow. You can start to see that the picture down below on the bottom left-hand side, if you were had a system like that, and you were, it doesn't matter what you were eating, what nutrition you're having, you're not going to get much because there's no means for anything to get into the system. Okay, so it's all about the flow. Okay. Here's another fact. Did you know most processed food is cationic in nature? I want you to read that again. Did you know most processed food is cationic in nature? And we talk about processed food being crap and being bad for us and processed sugars and all this sort of stuff, but what does it really mean? What's really going on at that biological level? Well, it's a cationic, it's a cations, okay? And once we understand that and we appreciate that that's happening, well, then we can address that because we can play, we can mix, we can change the mix, okay? So even to the point where you can almost eat a really bad meal and you can almost re-correct things. In theory, you could, okay, but rebalancing out because it's how many cations are coming in versus how many anions are coming in, and the work that the body needs to be able to do to be able to break that down. Okay, so this is the reason why processed foods are so bad for you. Okay. Well, so we've gone through a bit of the zeta potential. So this is the zeta potential, and impacting on the zeta potential is going to happen whenever we go out of whack on either one of these imbalances. Okay, so I've covered that. Now I'm going to talk through, and we're going to talk through each one of these imbalances and a bit of an overview. Now we're going to start off with electrolyte deficiency, which is the most common. Okay, I see this very, very commonly, especially with females. Low blood pressure, less than 112, 110. Things just a little bit slow, parasympathetic, a little bit, maybe a little bit catabolic and whatnot. But I see this. This is 99%, 95% of the people I work with have a deficiency imbalance as opposed to an excess balance. Okay, so we're just going to. So just electrolyte balance. So electrolyte deficiency balance. Some of the biological markers. Okay, we don't really need, there are some other markers to look at, and we'll touch that in a minute, but resting systolic blood pressure is less than 112, standing diastolic blood pressure is less than 73. All right, and a pulse is less than 70. The strong indicator here is the difference between resting pulse to standing pulse is 12. All right, this is the big marker. The resting, because you can have minus 112, and you can have minus 73, the standing diastolic. But if you don't have this 12 difference, there's probably something else going on. Okay, so this is what we need to look for, this 12 difference. Okay. And when we talk about electrolyte deficiency, very few doctors will ever complain about your blood pressure being too low, and I'm sure you're all aware of that. There's no drug for blood pressure, okay? The ramifications aren't in their training, all right? But we all know that high blood pressure can cause heart attacks and strokes and blowouts. So when they say your blood pressure is great even though it's too low, what they're saying is you'll never have a blowout. But is it fun to be running around on flat tires all day? Okay, and I'm sure there's a few of you out there that would agree that no, it's probably not the greatest, you know, to be running around on low blood pressure or low electrolytes is just like driving around in a car with flat tires. Okay, it's a struggle, and it never really gets any better. It's an ongoing struggle. Okay. So when we see low blood pressure, for example, anything lower than the systolic 112, which I mentioned just now, and the diastolic lower than the 73, we do consider that this is going to be electrolyte deficiency, especially when we have this pulse greater than 12. Okay. Some of the symptoms of electrolyte deficiency. All right. Now this condition worsens as urine conductivity moves higher than 12 millisiemens. You can see some of the issues here. Chronic fatigue, low blood pressure, decreased libido, you know, cravings, insomnia, anemia, osteoporosis, digestive issues, mental disorders. All right, you can see there's an enormous range of issues that can occur because of the electrolytes. Because once again, if we don't have that, if we don't have the means, if we don't have the conduit to move energy around the body, well, things are going to go wrong, aren't they? The body isn't going to have the resource it needs to be able to do what it needs to do. Okay. Some of the things you need to avoid with this balance. Okay. Now, we have to be, you know, we need to be a little bit careful here because, okay, we've got to be careful about drinking too much water. Okay, it doesn't mean you don't need more water, but it just means that you just got to be careful. And we may need to qualify you to drink more water because, for instance, for a catabolic person, if a catabolic person had low electrolytes, well, a catabolic person will struggle because they have quite a lot of diarrhea. A lot of their water goes through their bowels. So there's no point, you know, a lot of that water is just going to flush the whole system straight out. So we've got to try and fix the catabolic imbalance, start working on that at the same time so that we have the means so that we can, you know, we can start fixing things all at once. And the same as with digestion and increasing your salt intake, okay? So we do everything together. Okay, but the water thing is just, you just got to be a little bit careful. You know, you don't want to be drinking 3 liters of water if you're electrolyte deficient. If you're not working on making sure that we make sure that we get our catabolic balance fixed up. Okay, and avoid this. We all probably know this. Avoid drinking distilled water. Of course, there's no minerals in that, and also tap water. Okay, because of the chlorine and fluoride and whatnot. And to avoid eating too many sugars and especially starchy carbs. Okay, these foods can spike insulin levels very high and drop too low very, very quickly too. And an electrolyte deficient girl especially because most of I see them, these being girls, the sugar issue can be a massive one for you when because your resources are already down, you're already struggling. And then you eat some sugary foods, and then your body just freaks out and goes completely haywire. Okay, so the other thing too, electrolyte deficient person will tend to find that they tend to be more sensitive to things as well. So we have to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more sensitive with how we move forward, because you tend to don't have the buffering or the robustness to be able to do things too quick. All right, because you're a little too frail. It's just a little bit too. Okay, some of the things you can implement this correctly digesting your food. Obviously, this is a big one. All right, food. It's if we're not getting our electrolytes, our minerals, we're not digesting our food. All right, eating food, obvious ones, but this means by eating breakfast. All right, and I know people skip breakfast because breakfast tastes crap because they have poor digestion and whatnot, but we really need to make sure that we're getting 3 meals into our body a day and to get that happening. And once we start getting happening, we start getting some digestioning happening. All right, things will start working better and the body will start using things a little bit more. Okay, the body's not stupid; it knows what's going on. And once it starts to see things come in line a little bit more, and once it starts to see, you're getting some consistency in what you're doing, and especially what you're eating, it helps steady the boat. It helps calm things down. All right, this whole healing thing is about keeping it. It's about maintaining calm, and we don't want the body to react and bounce around when we're doing things. Okay, it's almost like we need to do this, without the body knowing. All right, the body is already reacting to things. We don't want the body to start freaking out more and more. Okay, tomatoes, the tomato sauce. I mean, this is an interesting one. Tomatoes will lift blood pressure pretty quick. Is it a solution? Not really, but it's just an interesting. Some of the electrolyte formulas. We will go into this more detail when we go into the testing. Okay, there are some other things we'll be looking at, but I'm just giving you an overview of this. Okay, but the main thing with the electrolyte deficiency is to correct digestion and add more salt. All right, if your blood pressure is below 112, 1110, you need to have more salt. That can be one of the quickest things you can do. I have helped turn people's lives around by doing nothing but taking sufficient amounts of unrefined salt. Okay, because this is pure electrolytes. It's immediate. Okay, so this is what you do to start with. This is the main things you do. There are some other things you can do. There's a product called electrolyte deficiency, which is from Empirical Labs, which you can take. This is a great one. This is designed specifically to help your body hold on to these minerals. Oral Life. It's a multi-mineral, but it's a multi-mineral that's been developed by Empirical Labs specifically for this imbalance. All right, it's not just just a bunch of minerals. This has been put together with this imbalance in mind. Okay. Trace minerals concentrates. I quite like this. The mineral drops. It's colloidal. It's something that if blood pressure is really too low, I would suggest that people do look at adding some minerals into the system in the meantime until they get digestion back on track and whatnot. Okay. Glutamine here as amino acid there, but you've got to be careful. Now, once we start looking at these things, we've got to look at some other contraindications. So we got to, if you're also anabolic, well then L-glutamine won't work, and there's a few pointers there. Okay. What else we got there? L-tyrosine, it's an amino acid again. It can be really good for electrolyte deficiency. It can help pick up energy, help just fire things up a little bit, but we don't want to take that at night, because especially if we have a catabolic imbalance, because it can fire things up a little bit too much. Zinc as well can be really good for electrolyte imbalance, deficiency, and molasses. Just a couple of supplements to avoid here: L-arginine and vitamin E. Okay. Okay, electrolyte excess, imbalance. This is, like I said, I don't often see electrolyte excess imbalance. It's not that common. It's because majority of my clients tend to be female. We tend to have electrolyte excess tend to be more of a male thing than anything else. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why I have very few uh, uh, male clients, and you know, I've done very little work with this. I've done a bit of work with some clients with cardiovascular for sure, and I've helped them greatly, but I don't get to see many men, which is unfortunate because I can help a lot of them. Okay, let's have excess. Okay, so when blood pressure is high, it's an indication of high amounts of minerals in the system. Okay, the sugars and proteins and God knows what else in there as well, but it's usually caused by high electrolytes, too many minerals, okay, in the system that just aren't being cleared. Okay, now this can be an expression. It's probably more often than not, it's going to be expression of lousy kidney function or poor hydration. Okay, um, so one of the things that I do, one of the things I recommend, depending on the blood pressure, but if it's, you know, once it gets a little bit too high, one of the things I recommend right up front to clients with high blood pressure is just to stop, is just to drink distilled water for a couple of days, and just to see if you can flush the system out. All right, and you'll probably find that the blood pressure will drop quite quick, and you'll start cleaning things out a bit. And you just do that for a few days, just by monitoring things. We don't want to drink distilled water for too long, of course, but it can be a great intervention. Okay, it's a little bit like, you know, you've got a goldfish. I've talked about this goldfish swimming around in a dirty pond. We can imagine what it'd be like if we could just clean that dirty pond and add some more clean water to it. All right, and this is what we're doing with the distilled water and high blood pressures. Just help the body clean things out and just give it a break for a minute. Okay, so no minerals, no vitamins, no nutrition, no supplements at all. Just distilled water or demineralized water for a few days. Okay, and it can be massive. Maybe add in some diatomaceous earth. And maybe a little bit of nepronol, systemic enzyme at the same time to help clear things out. But you know, excess is simply electrolyte excess is just like looking at a goldfish swimming around in a really dirty pond and it's just full of junk. Okay, and we just need to clean that junk out. Okay. This is just talking about the vascular system and the stiffening of the arterial walls, and this is where we use this 12 difference. Okay, this is the pulse, because pulse will increase once we get the stiffening of the arterial walls. The pulse will start to increase, and this is where this 12 difference comes from. Okay, as an indicator to the imbalance. Some causes of electrolytes excess: not drinking enough pure clean water or dilute the system. We talked about that just now. A catabolic imbalance where the body is sending too much water to the bowels and not enough through the kidneys. All right, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting, because we've got to start looking at these other systems before we jump in and go like, oh, we've got too much excess, let's jump in and start hammering the water. But hang on, does this person also have a catabolic imbalance? Because if they do, we need to fix it first, because the water's just going to go straight out the bowels. Okay, we're not going to clear out the system. Okay, this is another example of looking at the whole picture as opposed to looking at just one thing. Kidneys becoming compromised through poor, you know, dilution more than anything else. Autonomic nervous system disturbance can have plaqued up arterial wall. Now, some of the common symptoms of electrolyte excess imbalance. Okay, high blood pressure was pretty obvious. Circulatory problems. Okay, cardiovascular disease, and that's about it. Oh, hypertension. Some electrolyte excess, biological markers. Okay, resting to systolic blood pressure is 130. Standing diastolic blood pressure is greater than 87. Okay, and once again, the strong indicator, 12 being the difference. Okay, now obviously we have to use, you know, we have to use our discretion when we're working with people or we're working with ourselves to be able to say, well, we don't have the 12 difference, but we've got a really high blood pressures, both systolic and diastolic. Well, then you can probably be okay. You can, you know, just take the water. You know, you don't have to rely on this 12, but you know, depending on where those numbers are, you know, you'll get a bit of a feel for if that 12 is an issue or not for you. Okay. How to improve this imbalance? Well, we can start by changing the aspects of your lifestyle that are making this imbalance worse. Not using unrefined sea salt with your food, not properly digesting your food. Okay, everything's going to get back to digestion. Okay, If we don't have that, if we don't like having that, well then how, nothing's going to happen, and people don't know that this is not working. Drinking too little water, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest ones. Okay, and we have people drinking too little water with electrolyte deficiency as well. But this is with the electrolyte excess, it's a big one. Drinking tap water loaded with chlorine and fluoride, eating too many sugars, starchy high, taking antacids, not eating enough green veggies, or eating too many crappy oils. Okay. Supplements used with this imbalance. Now, right at the top here, okay, the most important supplement to use is water. Okay. We went through the program, we went through the lesson last week, and we went through all these different pH issues, and each one of them, the first thing on the list was water to address as a supplement. Okay, but if you have a catabolic imbalance, again, you fix that first, otherwise your body's just going to put everything through your bowels. Okay, but water's the most important. Okay, but then we have electrolyte excess. Okay, we had electrolyte deficiency on the other one. This is electrolyte excess. This is an Empirical Labs product designed specifically, again, to help the body be able to relieve this issue and move forward. Okay, L-taurine, taurine and amino acid. Most of you are aware of taurine, but avoid with a catabolic imbalance. Okay, vitamin E, avoid with an anabolic or carb burner imbalance. Auto-S. This is a Empirical Labs product. Auto-S. It's to do with your nervous system. I don't use it that much, but it's something we can use. Phosphoric acid is another. Phosdrops is another product we can use there. Magnesium chloride is also good. Okay, it's a good form of chloride for this imbalance. It's also good for a slow oxidizer. It's also good for poor digestion because of the chloride. Okay, so it's not just the magnesium, it's the chloride as well. All right. Potassium. Supplements to avoid with electrolyte imbalance. Vitamin D3, because it will just thicken everything up. L-glutamine. That's about it. Oh, okay. All right. We've got to our powerhouse topic fairly quick. I didn't think I'd get through this so quick, but that's okay. Okay, calcium to phosphoric ratios. This is one of the issues. One of the things that I see quite often is inverted pHs, which means that the urine pH is above saliva pH, which is completely inverted and completely the wrong way around. And it's an indication that something's seriously out of whack in the body. And more often than not, I see it tends to be more of a calcium issue, because the high urine pHs are due to the high calcium that the body's trying to get out of the system. Okay, and when this happens, more often than not, we will find a calcium to phosphorus ratio is out of whack, and we'll find people with bone spurs, calcification, lots of viruses and whatnot, because of all this calcification. Okay, not only that, when we have the stroke pattern. Dr. Kerry Reams called this inverted pH pattern the stroke pattern. I don't talk about it too much about that because it freaks people out. Okay, but this is what Dr. Kerry Reams calls it, which is why it needs to be corrected as soon as possible. Okay, the alkalinity will skyrocket. This is the excess calcium in the blood, and this again creates all sorts of ongoing energy issues, digestive issues, depressive issues, and anxiety, or just plain feeling weird because things are just so far out of whack. Your body's holding onto the rubbish, and it's trying to get rid of the good stuff. What's going on? All right, your phosphorus to calcium ratio is out of whack. It needs to be precisely right. If it's not right, your calcium is not going to remain or maintain in solution. It'll drop out of solution, and this is where you get the calcification and you get the the bone spurs and whatnot. Okay. Now, and so when I'm looking at this pattern, I would usually see something like a urine might be 6.8, 6.9 or 7, and then saliva might be 5.8 or something like that. We don't need to push the saliva down, but we really do need to push the urine down. And you can do that with drops, with phosphoric acid drops. Okay, it won't move saliva, but it will move urine, which is why we use this. Okay, So that if this is you, I suggest you get some. You try it out. This is one of the products. It's going to be unbelievable when you first start taking. If you do have an overcalcified body, because the overcalcification just causes so many issues. Okay, so get some. Take 5 to 10 drops in a glass twice a day, and monitor your pH, and just to see, make sure it doesn't get. Sorry, monitor your urine pH to make sure it doesn't go below 5.5. But do this. And I can almost guarantee if you do have this consistent issue, and when I say consistent issue, I'm talking about when we have these pHs patterns coming through consistently over a few days, not just, oh, I've done one and it's an inversion and then I've got to go and buy some pH drops. I don't think that's necessarily what you need to do. It's about it's about getting some consistency and saying, well, is this consistent? We don't want to just react straight on just one reading. But if it is, get some of this stuff, start taking it in the morning, sit back and you watch what happens. It can be incredible, the difference, okay? I'm not saying it's going to be that for you, I don't know, but I've seen big differences. I've used it myself. Diane has used it in the past. Couldn't believe, because I tend to be a little bit anabolic and a little bit more slow oxidized, so that's my body type. So it really works for me, but it can really make a big difference, okay? And it makes a difference very, very quickly. This is the difference that happens by the time you finish the glass of water, which is why I put it as a powerhouse topic, okay? And if you're ever working with anybody, or you know, friends or clients or whatever, and you do these pHs, as soon as you see this inversion, you start looking for, oh my God, this is a strong sign that things are going to go wrong. What else is going on? What other symptoms are happening? What other numbers? What are the other numbers looking like? Okay, maybe we can have a glass of. This is something you can have in your you know, in your room, and you can make up a drink there and then. You can say, have a sip, have a drink, try it, because the reaction, the effect is immediate. Okay, so give that a shot and let me know how you go. Okay, fantastic. Well, we've got through that pretty quick. Because I've broken this up into two sections, I'm gonna finish this now, and I'm gonna package it up into one video, and then I'm gonna do the case study in a minute. The other thing too, I'm gonna upload a couple of PDFs covering this session too. So thanks very much for hanging in there. I'm going to, as most of you are aware, I'm heading over to the UK. Well, I'm flying tomorrow. I'm starting to head out of Australia tomorrow and Monday, and I'm going to be in the UK next Tuesday, and I plan to be there for foreseeable future, as I go out there and I want to pursue this work and go and spend some time with my family. So I'm going to be in the UK next week, so there is going to be a little bit of a gap for communication and whatnot. Now, as far as I'm pretty certain I'll be able to get next week's lesson up by next Sunday, but just want to let you know, because I'm traveling, I should be okay, but once I get to the UK, we'll start locking everything in and getting a lot more structured, because it's so much easier, and I can plan ahead, and I know exactly where I'm at. Okay, so thanks very much for listening, and make sure you have a look at the other video, and I'll talk to you guys all very soon. Bye bye.